button. It will help the algorithm to keep this content going. So, yeah, we are traveling to the Pacific Northwest. As I said last week, I have to talk about him. I'm sorry. I know there's so many stories, so many books, so many documentaries about my man, but I am just always been intrigued about him. And yes, you guessed it, Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix, I don't know why, because I don't know what the intriguement that I have of him. I think not only because of his music, but with him as a person himself, just learning about his story and about him as a person. He was, when he passed away, I was only, 3.5 years old, but I just remember just seeing him on TV and just was kind of like fascinated of the way he played the guitar and just all the antics that he did with his guitar and just the music itself. At that very young age, I was, just fascinated with that. And I've been fascinated ever since. And so as I got older, I just wanted to do, some background and learn more about him as a person. Not only just, through the music, but as a person. And we all know he was born on November 27th, 1942 in Seattle, Washington, to James Allen Hendrix and Lucille Jeter. Both of his parents were pretty young. His mother was only 16 when she had him. And I think his father was like in his early 20s. And I think they connected because of their love of dancing. They were both good dancers. And so that was their connection. Based on documentaries and stories, his childhood wasn't the best at all. He had another brother, Leon, but he had also 3 more siblings, which was interesting to me. It wasn't just he and Leon. It was, 3 more. He had another brother and 2 sisters. For whatever reason, the 3 other siblings were given to the ward of the state by his father. One of his brother was special needs, and I guess he felt that he just didn't want to. He didn't have the money to really take care of him and his special needs, so he decided to, turn him over to the state, which was very devastating to Jimmy's mother, Lucille, and as well as his other 2, younger sisters. So that affect his mom. His mom herself, she was interesting. She was a young mom. I mean, she was only 16 years old, so she still was a child herself, a teenager, and just wasn't really, equipped to settle down and, be a mom, even though she did the best she could. But she was still wanted to be out in the streets. She still wanted to party. And, so she was kind of like floating in and out of Jimmy's life through his childhood until she unfortunately passed away from a ruptured spleen. And from what I understand, that really affected Jimmy deeply because he loved his mom. And what really, really affected him was the fact that he was not able to go to her funeral. His father didn't allow he and his brother to attend her funeral. Rather than giving her her last respects, he gave, I mean, these, and the boys were still young. He gave them some whiskey or liquor, and pretty much gave them a drink and said, "This is how we deal with grieving." So that was that left an effect on him. And throughout his childhood, his father was a hard worker, but he was also a strict father. He was a strict man. Many times, the boys weren't, Jimmy and his, and when I say boys, I'm talking about he and his brother Leon, because they were the only ones that were in the house. And the father, I don't know, he really wasn't a great caregiver. He worked, but he pretty much, the boys were kind of left on their own devices, meaning that there wasn't any kind of structure in the home. And many times that, county children's services were called on them, because of the boys being somewhat neglected. But then you had the neighborhood mothers that kind of took the boys under, kind of care for them as best as they could. They would make sure that they had dinner and, they try to help out as best they could. Jimmy became interested in music. He loved the blues. If I can recall, one of his favorite artists was like Howlin' Wolf. He listened to Howlin' Wolf. He listened to Elvis. He listened to Elmore James, and he just was fascinated with the guitar. And just by chance, his father was cleaning out a garage for some lady that she paid him to clean out her garage, and he found like a guitar, with kind of a broken, it wasn't broken, but it was just a old guitar, and he was given that. He was allowed to keep that. He asked if he can have it, and she said yeah. And so his father gave him that guitar, and that was something, that was the beginning, because at least Jimmy had something to kind of emulate what he listened to on the radio. Before that, he would use a broom and pretend like he was playing the guitar. But now he had something, even with just a one string broken guitar, it was something. But moving forward, as a teenager, again with no structure in the home, they were pretty much running wild in the streets. They had no curfew. I know I saw one documentary with one of his friends' mom. Jimmy would go over to the friend's house and kind of, like stay. He didn't have a curfew to go home. It was to the point to where, the mothers, had to tell Jimmy, look, it's late, you got to go home. But that could have been because there was, he felt the family structure in his friend's home, and he didn't really want to go home because he knew that there was nothing there. His father was either working or when he wasn't, he wasn't really a nurturing father to them. So Jimmy would gravitate to someone, either of his friends or either extended relatives that had a more structured environment for him. But, like I said, became wild and, was starting to get in trouble. He started to steal cars and things, and, he was given a choice: either you join the service or you go to jail. So Jimmy, decided to enlist into the army, and then he got signed up with the 101st Airborne, I believe. And, the military, he didn't like the military. He hated, again, being hollered at. In military, that's all about structure and following instructions. And that's just not what Jimmy was about. So, but one thing, the bright spot in being in the military was that he met his longtime friend and later bandmate, Billy Cox, who played the bass. So there was a band that was created in the army while he was serving. They had a little military band, and he was able to play with them. So that was one of the bright spots of him being in the army. He eventually got out. The excuse that he said later on was that he jumped out of a plane or parachuting. He broke his ankle, and that's why he was discharged. But then there were stories. The real reason why he got out was because he feigned that he was gay, or he was homosexual or something. And at that time, that just wasn't accepted in the military. So he used that excuse as a way to be discharged. That was the story that came out later on, the real reason why he got out. But when he got out, interesting enough, he did not go back to Seattle. He somehow landed in New York, and he started to play with, getting connected with local bands. And there was more of the black groups like the Isley Brothers. He got, was a background player for the Isley Brothers, Little Richard, and I think it was, the King Casuals. And Jimmy was different from the beginning. He was an individualist. He just didn't follow, he never followed the script. He never, because he was his own individual, and he wanted to he had a lot of ideas in his head that he wanted to play, but it just didn't go along with what the music that he was playing for. He would just, people would say he would just bust out into a solo and didn't stick with the program, with the format of playing. And it got so frustrating. I mean, he will always get fired from a group and get, hired. He'll find another band to play with. And once again, he'll get fired because he just did not, he was always wanted to go solo, do something solo or do something crazy while playing on stage. So that really got annoying to a lot of groups. I mean, he just wasn't a team player because he was actually, meant to play solo. So we all know how he eventually went to England. He got Linda Keith was the one who, he met with Linda Keith in New York, and she introduced him to Chaz Chandler, who wanted to sign him. And, that's his ticket to go to the UK. And over there in the UK is when he really became who he was. He was honed in his music in the UK. And it's kind of, I don't know, but it's kind of sad in a way. But it was often, common that a lot of artists here in the States, they couldn't be creative as they want to. They weren't accepted here in the States. You have to go over to the UK or somewhere else out of your own country in order to feel, you know, to feel like you are recognized, or feel that you were able to, do your own type of music. And the UK was more accepting of your style of music or whatever. He was often made fun of here, and with the other bands and groups that he was playing with, they didn't really understand his style. They looked at him as being too wild and too rock, and he's playing too much wild, more of a rock and roll type style of playing, rather than playing soul music or R&B. Even though he could, but he just wasn't really accepted. And so he felt that he couldn't be who he actually was and what he wanted to do in his music. So he had to go over to, the UK in order to feel that he can actually do and create the music, the type of music that he wants. So again, like I said, all of this stuff that I'm saying is nothing new. Everybody knows, everybody knows the history of him, and how the Jimi Hendrix experience have started with Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell. I guess I just want to get more into what he went through as an artist. His career was only 4 years, the span of 4 years, a very short career span. And during that 4 years, he was, just playing hard. He got with, the management was very, you had Mike Jeffries. First it was Chas Chandler. And for some reason, I don't, how they separated or departed, but then it was Chas Chandler who became his main manager. And this guy, I don't know, there's always stories about him that he was just this former, worked for the intelligence with the British military. He was just this mysterious type guy that he always, had these dark glasses on, and he was just always, he always had this mystique about him. But being connected with him, Jimmy himself, and along with the band, they were, with the, they, made the hit songs Purple Haze, Hey Joe, Foxy Lady, and all of that. And that became a major hit in the UK. But then, after a while, those songs, Jimmy wanted to expand his repertoire, expand his creativity of his songs. And he felt like he was just in a box. People just want to just hear those, same style of songs of, Purple Haze and Hey Joe, and, but Jimmy wanted to just, kind of expand his creativity, and he couldn't. And then not only that, he signed, all this contract, even before he became famous. He signed this ridiculous contract when he was really, up and coming, before he became, who he was. And he never fulfilled that contract. Well, the producer or the management of that company that he signed a contract with, once Jimmy became famous, now they wanted to go after him because he, for breach of contract. So he was obligated to, put out music really to fulfill that particular contract. He was just, based on, all the documentaries, and I'm sourcing, documentaries and books and things that I've read, that he was really worked to death. He really was. He didn't have anything to show for it. I mean, he was working to pay off all these debts that he incurred, from past contracts that he had signed that, that he really didn't understand, and that he put himself in, as artists, a lot of our artists, they don't really, you got to really know the business side of the entertainment. You can't be just an artist and just play, even though that's your craft. You really have to understand the business part, because you get really screwed. And artists like him and other artists from back in the day, they really got screwed over on royalties and just being paid. A lot of times they weren't being paid, and that was the thing with Hendrix. Michael Jeffries was he was ripping him off because he used Jimmy, the sales of all the money that Jimmy made. He would invest, have these investments, and they say he was a part of something of the, in the underworld, that he owed money to whoever. And, so that in order for, to pay the debt that he owed to the underworld, quote unquote, unbeknownst to Jimmy, he had to, continuously perform. And you can tell, towards the end of, getting towards 1969 into 70, that he was tired. The experience, Noel Redding, he got fed up because he just didn't like how the direction of the group was going. So he quit. Mitch Mitchell, he stayed on. But again, Jimmy wanted to expand himself. And he, reconnected with his old, friend, Billy Cox, who played the bass. So Billy Cox, played with him. And, again, it was just this constant touring, mainly over in the UK. He had, it's like every night, he had to play at some venue, and it just took a toll on him. But in the 4 years, his style of music had made a great impact for the up and coming guitarists. Nobody can really emulate. There's people that are close. You can hear you can hear his influence in their playing, but a lot of things that that Jimmy does, people can't really emulate. There's people that are very close in and doing, and playing like him. But again, you can hear, his influence in their playing. But I guess I want to talk about towards the end of his, the days and, the year before, or during the, months before his untimely death. There's so many theories out there. There's so many conspiracy theories out there with what was going on with him. Again, he was just in he had a lot of financial problems. Even he had he was in a paternity lawsuit. Someone had, one of his old girlfriends had filed a paternity suit against him. So he was dealing with that. Again, dealing with lack of money. But one of the bright spots was that he took the money that he had saved. He took his own money and created his own studio, Electric Ladyland in New York. And he was very, very, very excited and very proud of that studio, because it had one at the time the top-notch technology of producing the studio that produces all the sounds, everything that was state of the art. And it was for, I think, me personally, I think, it was a great sounding, it was a great opportunity for the up and coming younger artists. And I'm pretty sure he would have wanted to produce other up and coming young artists, and they would have came into his studio, and he was able to do that. But sadly, he never got a chance to really enjoy his what he had really was excited about was that recording studio. Again, he was just under pressure of performing, constantly performing to pay off, Jeffrey's, debt that he had used Jimmy's money in, bad investments. And it was to the point, eventually Jimmy was catching on because he wasn't getting paid. He was pretty much, working for, to pay off debt for somebody else, and on top of that, everybody wanted a piece of him, it was just nonstop. Not only, it was the time of the 60s. So yeah, he was, acid, he was on, drugs, acid and all that. And people, there's ever no ending supply of pills and, acid. And a lot of times, most of the time he took it just to perform. He would be up, days on end, not actually having the opportunity to rest, because he had all these shows, all these commitments of shows that he had to do. But towards the end, he knew he had some kind of premonition that he was not going to last long. It was said that, he even, I guess people had asked when the next time, he's going to go, can he go back home to Seattle? And, he pretty much said that the next time I'll be going back to Seattle will be in a pine box. And, he just, I don't know, you just he had a sense that something was going to happen. They said he was always paranoid. He always thought, people were after him. Like I said, I don't, he had this sixth sense that something was going to happen. And on September 18th, unfortunately, he was found unalived. The official cause was he exasperated in his own vomit. But now reports are coming out that he could have been unalive through other means. People are saying he was drowned. We call it waterboarding, which he was forced to. They found a lot of red wine in his system, and so he wound up drowned to death, being forced with wine. Then there's people were saying, well, FBI was involved because he was being looked at because of his stance against the Vietnam War and the politics and the government. He was speaking against the government. So they said that could have been a factor. And then there was accusation that he was part of the Black Panthers, that he was funneling money to the Black Panthers. But, who knows? But I want to talk about Monica Danneman, the latest girlfriend that he had before his untimely demise. She was there when when he passed away, but then she had all these different stories. Her story was not consistent throughout the years. First she said he was asleep when she got up and left the apartment that they were staying at, and she went to get cigarettes, and when she came back that he had vomited all over the place, and then noticed that he was he wasn't breathing, so she called the ambulance. And there was just so many different versions of what she said. But what's weird to me about her was that it's like she like time had just stopped. Throughout the years, through interviews, she changed her story. So that was always a question of she know exactly what happened. But she felt like she spent the rest of her life just like in a shrine, just made this whole shrine about Jimi, as if that they had this long-term relationship, which in reality from the documentaries and stories that I've read or have seen, that they weren't in that long relationship, but she just made it like they were just talking about marriage and everything, and then she just pretty much just her life was just froze in time. She's just like this whole mural about him, and just, but I think in 96 they found her unalived. She was found unalive. So me personally, my thoughts, I'm wondering if it was just years and years of guilt, because she knew exactly what happened with him, and she may have was a part of it, and she just couldn't live with herself. Eventually it just got to her. which is why she kind of like was stuck in the, in that time, and really didn't move on with her life because she, of because she was there. She know exactly what happened. And and I think people were starting to really figure out the truth was about to come out as to what really happened and how she was part of the what part of what happened to him. So, but I don't know. His life has always been intriguing to me. Um, as a person, he was just this shy, very humble, very talented, young guitar player that contributed a lot to American music, especially in the 60s. How he innovated the sound of guitar. And and he uh, created a sound that up and coming, guitarists have emulated, try to emulate him. So I just wanted to kind of also, pay homage to him because he was a great innovator. Throughout his difficult life that he led and the fast life that he led, he made a great contribution to American music, the rock, the psychedelic, and he wanted to expand himself beyond that. I think by 1970, he wanted to experience and try different things in music. He wanted to incorporate jazz. He wanted to do a little bit of soul and rock. I mean, the 70s, by the time the 70s was coming, that whole change of music of the 60s was kind of dying out. And he knew it. He knew, and he wanted to, be a part of that new change of the sound of the 70s. But unfortunately, he couldn't do it. He was, again, he was boxed in to only play a certain, his old, stuff that he, started off with. And he just, did not want to do that. I mean, it just played out. It played its course. I mean, he became famous off of it, but when he wanted to try other things, have other types of band and play with other types of music, and he just wasn't, given that opportunity. So, Jimi Hendrix, we still talk about you. We still, are fascinated of what you contribute, what you add to American music, and he'll never be forgotten. So that's it. Next week, I'm going to be switching gears. I had another special request, and it's going to be the Fifth Dimension, who were very popular into the 60s, and their sound of music was popular. So we're going to talk about the Fifth Dimension. So if you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you have any feedback or commentary that you wanted to add, please do so. Let's get the conversation going. All right, you guys take care. Bye.